When most people think of Martha Stewart, they picture a perfectly set table, a home filled with fresh flowers, or recipes that seem to blend elegance with simplicity. She became a household name, a brand synonymous with good taste, with grace, and with the idea that domestic life could be elevated to an art form. For decades, Martha Stewart was America's homemaker, the woman who built an empire out of the ordinary rituals of everyday living. But in the early 2000s, that image collided with an entirely different one. Martha Stewart dressed not in tailored suits or pastel sweaters, but standing in a federal courtroom, facing the possibility of years in prison. It was a cultural shock, a moment when America realized that even its most polished icons could fall into scandal. This is the story of how Martha Stewart, the queen of lifestyle, ended up convicted in one of the most high-profile insider trading cases of modern times. It began with a company called ImClone Systems, a biopharmaceutical firm developing a drug called Erbitux, a highly anticipated cancer treatment. ImClone's founder, Samuel Waxel, was close to Martha Stewart. Socially, he moved in the same circles. On December 27, 2001, Waxel learned that the Food and Drug Administration had rejected ImClone's application for Erbitux. He immediately tried to sell his shares before the public announcement, which would cause the stock to plummet. Regulators quickly caught wind of the attempted sale. That same day, Martha Stewart sold nearly 4,000 shares of ImClone, avoiding a loss of about 45,000. On the surface, it was a small transaction for someone whose net worth soared into the hundreds of millions. But the timing raised red flags, especially since her broker, Peter Bakanovic of Merrill Lynch, was deeply entangled in the Waxel trades. When the Securities and Exchange Commission began investigating, Martha insisted she had a standing agreement with Bakanovic to sell ImClone if it fell below $60 per share. Her defense was simple. This was not inside information, it was routine portfolio management. But investigators weren't convinced. Phone logs, emails, and testimony suggested Bakanovic's assistant, Douglas Fanuel, had tipped her off that Waxel and his family were dumping their stock. What followed was a federal investigation that became a media circus. Because this wasn't just any defendant, it was Martha Stewart. Her name, her face, her brand were instantly recognizable, and her trial became a national spectacle. In June 2003, Stewart was indicted on 9 counts, including securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. The government alleged not only that she sold stock based on non-public information, but that she lied to investigators and attempted to cover up her tracks. The obstruction charge was critical. It suggested her downfall wasn't simply about the initial sale, but about decisions made afterward to protect herself. As the case moved to trial in early 2004, America's homemaker walked past photographers into a Manhattan federal courthouse, her empire suddenly overshadowed by the specter of criminal conviction. The prosecution painted a picture of deception. They argued that Stewart lied repeatedly, crafted false explanations for her trade, and even altered a logbook to back up her story. Douglas Fanuel, the young broker's assistant, became the star witness, testifying that he told Stewart about Waxel's attempt to sell, which led to her dumping her own shares. His testimony carried enormous weight, not just because of the facts but because of the optics. A powerful celebrity defended by expensive lawyers, accused of misleading authorities, while a lower-level employee exposed the truth. Stewart's defense team, led by Robert Morvillo, countered that the government was overreaching. They claimed the ImClone sale was small and insignificant, hardly the type of case that warranted aggressive prosecution. They suggested she was targeted because of her fame, making for a splashy headline. They argued there was no proof she knowingly acted on insider information, and that Fanuel's testimony was unreliable, given that he had struck a deal with prosecutors to avoid harsher penalties. As the trial progressed, it became clear the case was not simply about whether Stewart saved $45,000 in losses. It was about honesty, credibility, and the perception of integrity. For a woman whose career rested on trust, with millions believing in her guidance, being accused of lying under oath was devastating. In court, Stewart was composed, polished, sometimes even defiant, but to the jury, the evidence spoke louder. The prosecution emphasized that obstruction of justice was not a minor technicality. It was a crime that cut to the heart of the legal system. On March 5, 2004, the jury returned its verdict, guilty on 4 counts: conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and 2 counts of making false statements. The securities fraud charge, which would have been the most severe, was dropped before the verdict. Martha Stewart, America's lifestyle queen, was now a convicted felon. She faced up to 20 years in prison, though sentencing guidelines suggested far less. Outside the courthouse, Stewart appeared stoic, telling supporters she was obviously distressed but would continue to fight. The sentencing came in July 2004. Judge Miriam Goldman Cedarbaum sentenced her to 5 months in federal prison, 5 months of home confinement, 2 years of probation, and a $30,000 fine. For someone who had built her brand on perfection, the sentence was both humiliating and historic. Martha Stewart would go to prison. The image shocked America, a woman who had taught millions how to roast a turkey or decorate a living room, now preparing for life behind bars. She reported to the Alderson Federal Prison Camp in West Virginia in October 2004. Known as Camp Cupcake by the media, Alderson was minimum security, but it was still prison. While many imagined she would struggle, reports suggested she adapted with surprising resilience. She taught yoga, mentored inmates, and maintained her composure. Some joke that, even in prison, she carried herself with the poise of a lifestyle guru. Beneath the headlines, it was a stark reminder of how quickly fortunes could change. When she was released in March 2005, Stewart wasted no time reclaiming her brand. She launched a comeback tour that included a new version of her TV show, a spin-off called The Apprentice Martha Stewart, and the expansion of her product lines. For many, her ability to return to the public eye after a conviction was, honestly, pretty remarkable. She leaned into the scandal, acknowledging it without letting it define her. In time, the conviction became a footnote, a reminder of a stumble, but not a permanent stain. The Martha Stewart case remains significant for several reasons. It showed that fame and success do not guarantee immunity from the law. It demonstrated how obstruction of justice, lying to investigators, and covering up can be as damaging, or honestly even more damaging, than the original alleged crime. It highlighted the cultural fascination with seeing a powerful woman brought down, then rise again. For some, Stewart's downfall was a lesson in hubris. For others, proof of a system eager to make an example out of a celebrity. Looking back, the irony is sharp. Martha Stewart did not go to prison for insider trading. The government could not prove that charge. She went to prison for lying, obstructing justice, and covering her tracks. The $45,000 she saved on ImClone stock seemed small compared to the damage done to her brand, reputation, and the years spent rebuilding. Yet her story became one of resilience, a reminder that even icons can falter but recover. Martha Stewart's courtroom saga stands as one of America's most infamous celebrity trials, not because of the crime's size but because of the name attached. It was the trial of a woman who sold an image of perfection, caught in the messiness of the real world. It was a reminder that the law applies to everyone, whether you're a Wall Street executive or the queen of good housekeeping. It was proof that America's obsession with scandal, downfall, and redemption is as enduring as any recipe or decorating tip. So what does this story mean today? It means trust is fragile, integrity matters more than image, and sometimes the cover-up is worse than the crime. Martha Stewart's prison sentence did not end her career, it reshaped it. She became not just a homemaker, but a survivor of scandal, someone who faced the system and walked out stronger. In a strange twist, her legacy now includes not only centerpieces and cookbooks, but also a cautionary tale about honesty, accountability, and the price of deception. And here's the takeaway. Celebrity or not, wealth or not, no one is immune to the law. The Martha Stewart trial is a reminder to every investor, every professional, and every dreamer, do not underestimate the consequences of dishonesty. Whether in business, finance, or personal life, integrity is the one asset you cannot afford to lose. If you found this story eye-opening and want more untold truths about the scandals that rocked the worlds of business, entertainment, and beyond, make sure to like this video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications. The stories that shape our culture don't always happen in the spotlight of a kitchen set. They They unfold in courtrooms, boardrooms, and behind closed doors. And we'll be here to uncover them all.